Welcome to the Writer Dojo with your host, Steve Diamond.
What is up?
And Larry Correa.
Buenos dias.
Today's episode, Heroes versus Villains.
All right, everyone. Welcome back. Larry and I are here again, and we are going to continue talking about characters today.
Well, we did the last episode, and we talked about characters a lot, and it was fun, and we got into building characters and how you could build worlds off them. But we didn't get a lot into the nuts and bolts of different kinds of characters and how we create them. So I kind of want to go into that a little bit more.
Yeah, I think we're going to, how about we start with just kind of the generics. So you're good guys, you're bad guys.
Protagonist, antagonist.
All right.
Heroes and villains.
Heroes and villains. Everyone loves heroes and everyone loves villains. At least that's the way it should be, right?
If they're good characters.
Because it doesn't matter if a character is good or bad. It matters how well you like to read the parts that they're in.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting thing. And I've seen this, you see this in third-person novels, where they'll have, like, say, 3 or 4, probably 3 main narrator characters, right? Main point-of-view characters. And the chapters will jump between them. Have you guys ever found where you're reading a book and it's like, oh, it's chapter from this guy. Oh, it's great. Chapter from her. Oh, she's great. Then it's a chapter from the third person. You're like, oh, gosh, not this guy. So what you got there, that might necessarily not be a totally bad thing. It just might be that you personally hate that character and don't click with them. It might be actually a good character. Everybody else might like him. But if everybody hates the same character, yeah, you need to fix that guy or replace him or hit him with a truck or something. You got to mix that up.
You know, I think of a character that both you and I like, and I know that you and I both like this character quite a bit because we based a character in Servants of War off of him, and that's Christoph Waltz.
Oh my gosh!
In that Quentin Tarantino movie, Inglourious Basterds.
Okay, so that opening sequence, if you guys have not seen Inglourious Basterds, it's been out forever.
And
okay?
you don't. And look, you don't have to go watch that whole movie if you don't want, because Quentin Tarantino's work is always overly wrought and done, and he's kind of a jerk face.
This movie
you can just see this opening scene, and it will tell you everything you need to know.
This is one of those movies that it's a movie that's got these amazing moments of brilliance, and then it's just a big stupid cartoon, the rest of it. But in the moments of brilliance, there's this one guy. Is Colonel Landa, the Jew hunter. This guy he's a Nazi officer, or SS officer, I believe. Super friggin' evil. However, he's evil in a charming way. And he's evil through intelligence. And he's evil through, I don't know how to describe it. There's this opening scene, he flawlessly moves between English, French, and German while he's trying to find these little Jewish girls that are hiding beneath the floorboards of this farmhouse.
Well, and he knows they're there.
Oh, it's so intense. And so me and Steve, we actually did basic character on this guy. And Steve writes that kind of character way better than I do. So I'm going through doing the editing passes. And I changed this, like those scenes got changed very little. So the point of view scenes. So if you hate this guy when you read this book, that's on Steve, okay? Because this dude's dark. But what a powerful character, though.
And he is unapologetically a bad guy.
He is such a
for
bad
the
guy.
entire show.
There is
no redeeming qualities.
Well, no, because then he's like, well, I'll go ahead and I'll betray Hitler because, I personally benefit from it. He's a dirtbag in every way. But that is a villain character that is just absolutely amazing. On heroes and villains, this is something people get really hung up on like heroes should always be perfectly good and villains should always be perfectly evil.
But no one's like that though.
Yeah, very, very seldom are people like that in real life. Very seldom are your good guys flawless archetypes of perfection. Usually that only happens in propaganda.
Well, talk to any dad, okay?
Love their kids.
Someone who you say is an amazing, awesome dad. And all of them you'll say, oh, do you love your kids? Of course they love their kids. Do you love your wife? Of course they love their wife. And it's obvious that they do. Their day-to-day interactions show and prove that they do. However, and they're the loving ones. They go out and they barbecue for their kids, and go to swim parties, and play princess tea party with Doji Princess Tea Party
Doji
with
Princess Tea Party.
with their daughters and whatnot, right? And then you ask them a hypothetical. What happens if someone insults your wife or your kids? And they go straight murder face. They're like, oh, no, that's done. You're done. Does that mean that, so that individual in that moment in time, when you press that hypothetical on them, suddenly they're willing to do things that a good person might not be willing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's to make some of your best characters when you have good guys that will do what they've got to do in certain situations. I mean, we've talked about John Wick before. I think John Wick is a fantastic character.
Terrific character.
And it's cheesy. It's a cheesy movie, super fun. But John Wick is a powerhouse character, and it's actually a pretty straightforward character. There's not a lot of nuance here.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. In the shows, they talk about, and they joke about this in the third movie. They're like, all of this because of a puppy, right?
Yeah.
So for those of you that have not watched John Wick 1, that came out forever ago, you're a monster. And I'm going to spoil one small part, and that's the poor guy has his puppy killed. Now, this does a couple things. One, this immediately sets him up as the sympathetic character in the movie, and it sets up everyone else as the people that you're okay with if he shoots them in the face.
Which he does.
Because they killed his puppy.
Like 98 guys died because of that dog.
And as both Larry and I, if you don't know this, we are both dog dudes.
I'm a dog guy.
And Larry's dog is big like him, and my two dogs are small like my kids. So,
see, they built that character, though, with a simple formula. It's a simple, straightforward formula, played to perfection. He's kind of emotionally stunted. It actually works really good for Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
It's absolutely perfection. You know what I mean? And so that's one of those characters that's just an iconic character. It's very straightforward. I was going to say on the imperfection thing, though, don't overdo that, because a lot of people get this thing where they need to make their characters just too imperfect. And if this is your protagonist, this is your hero, this is the guy we're rooting for, this has still got to be somebody that I want to read about. And this is where I struggle with, like, Stephen King. Like, Stephen King characters, I don't think Stephen King is a mad talented dude. He's got a great work ethic, but I disagree with a lot of his writing choices. But his characters, I hate most Stephen King characters, like his heroes.
Well, because they're not heroes.
I wouldn't want to be, protagonists, I guess, the person the book is about. I would not want to be around them.
No, they seem like dirtbags.
Yeah, most of his characters are dirtbags. They've got all sorts of problems. They're alcoholic school teachers for the most part, for whatever reason.
Failed writers.
Usually. Or, I mean, he's had a handful of characters. He can do a hero character. Like, there's the book, I want to say it's The Bad Place. Yeah. No, that's Dean Koontz.
That's Dean Koontz.
Oh, yeah. Needful Things.
Yep.
Needful Things. He's got the sheriff.
Yep.
The sheriff in that is a straight up legit hero character. He's a sympathetic hero character, and he's a good man. So I know Stephen King can do it.
Well, and in his novel 11/22/63.
Oh yeah, I've only watched the show because Nick Searcy is awesome.
Oh, yeah, that's true. The show's a pretty good take on the book. There's a few divergent pieces, but the main character is actually a good guy. Like, he's a good person. He goes through a really bad time, makes some weird decisions that don't feel out of place, and he goes and he does his thing, and by the end of the book, he has made decisions that you feel are natural, and the actions he takes and the choices and the problems that he overcomes, they feel like problems that he could overcome. And to your point, if you make the person so imperfect and so terrible and so stunted, there comes a point where I feel like it's not believable that they can overcome some of the problems that they're overcoming. You're like, what? You're not going to get there. Come on.
Speaking of, we always talk about tools in the toolbox, but that's one of those where you're taking one of your best tools and you're blunting it. Yeah. You're making it harder on yourself. Now, sometimes the point of the story is that you're writing about a scumbag. Yeah. And in that case, What?
I've done that a time or two.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so like we're talking about Kristoff, you know. But the thing is, if you're writing a scumbag, this is easier with the villains. But sometimes the purpose of the character is he is supposed to be a scumbag character, and that's part of the fun. But even then, it's fun. It's usually their scumbaggery exists for a reason, and usually entertaining in their scumbaggery.
This is the reason why people like Loki in the Marvel movies.
Which I've not watched the show yet, so yeah. But yeah, he's Loki, definitely played by Tom Hiddleston, having a good time. You can tell Tom Hiddleston's having fun.
Yeah,
I mean, that's obvious. He's enjoying that role. Yeah, so you can have total dirtbag. Okay, so I wrote Lorenzo in Dead Six.
Dead Six.
Lorenzo is a horrible person. He's a protagonist. He's the hero, but the guy is a thief. He's a liar. He's a cheat. He's a scumbag in a lot of ways. He is a vengeful dude. He's got severe anger issues. I straight up have him like throw fits during this book and like punch. He's punching holes in walls and like, you know, the guy is just, he's not a good person. However, he's an entertaining person. He's an entertaining character and he's a tough bastard and he's really, really, really good at what he does. And you take those elements of his professionalism, the fact he's a cold-hearted killer and a thief, but then I put these little elements of his humanity where you can see that he's got some bits where there are things that appeal to his humanity. And he's got little quirks and traits that are very human. And so he's actually a really popular character. He's just the dark side of us. Like everybody has like this dark side of like, if your life went horribly wrong, where there are people like look at Lorenzo as like, yeah, if my life went horribly wrong, I could see myself being kind of like that. So that was like when I wrote him, that's my dark parts. We're writing that guy.
Yeah, you know, I think that oftentimes the differences between your protagonist and antagonist, or a hero or a character being one of those, is a very small line. You know,
well, there's the old thing about one guy's hero is another guy's villain.
Oh, of course, right.
Yeah.
You know, and you can look at this in a couple different ways, and that's when you're making. Let's stick with your protagonist for now, and then in the back half we'll deal more with antagonists. If you're looking at your protagonist and you're thinking, okay, I want this guy to be more or less the good guy, okay, or at least the person who's driving the story towards a positive conclusion, more or less. Then, okay, what do I need? What will make it? It was like what we said in our previous character episode, and that is start asking the questions. So, okay, well, why is this person like this? He's a good person. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
Some people it's
maybe he had a good upbringing.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with having a guy who's legit just a hero.
Yeah.
And why is he a hero? He's a hero.
He is.
Captain America is a hero. Captain America, when he was a little picked on guy from Brooklyn, was a hero.
Yeah.
You know, and that was the whole thing they had. But that whole story was the fact that he was just genuinely the best of us.
Yeah.
You know, and they played that up. And so, but like, you know, where does he come from? Why is he here? That's the questions you ask about all your characters. You know, there's a part of it too is that we've talked about genre before, but it's the genre you're writing for. And some genres want more flawed characters.
Yeah.
And other genres want more straightforward characters.
Yeah.
Like if you're writing gritty crop drama, like if you have like a pure as driven snow hero character in, you know, The Wire.
Oh, that's not going to work.
Yeah, that would be like weird. I mean, maybe you could do it if you're a good enough storyteller, but the people aren't going into that expecting that kind of thing.
It would have to be, in my opinion, if you're going to do something like that, it has to be for contrast or for bait and switch. You know what I mean?
Well, because what that show actually did is we took guys that looked like scumbags
and showed their intelligence.
and showed their good. Well, I was thinking like Omar.
Yeah.
Omar coming. Oh man, Omar is one of the greatest characters in the history of TV, and
he actually has pretty good intentions.
he does. He's a bad dude,
Oh yeah.
but he's got a code.
Yeah.
You know, some makes him a fantastic character. Absolutely fantastic character.
Well, and you know,
And some shows he'd be the hero. Other shows he'd be the villain.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, that's almost kind of the what's the show? Person of Interest.
I
Right?
love that show. Yeah.
And in many cases,
There's a cross-genre show for you.
it went full on cyberpunk at the end. But the main crew, and they allude to this, especially in the last 2 seasons, that those guys are the enemies of all this other progress, quote unquote progress that is happening. And in many cases, they would be the terrorists.
Oh yeah.
In Star Wars, the rebels are just terrorists.
Yeah. If they were to do an actual movie from the Empire's perspective,
it would be this bleak, like, oh my gosh, the terrorists got us again. What are we going to do? Let's make a giant space station with an exhaust port.
Yeah, but I don't want them to make that movie because that would require the Star Wars people to have, like,
a brain,
quality and vision. Well, put Jon Favreau on; it'll be great. Yeah, Jon Favreau got it.
All right. Now, speaking of bad Star Wars villains like Rian Johnson and Kathleen Kennedy, what we're going to do is when we come back from our break, we're going to talk about antagonists in contrast to these protagonists that we're talking about. And what are some of the things that both Larry and I do ourselves and what we've seen other authors do that really work for us and what we think that you can learn from. So give us a minute and we'll be right back.
A lost colony planet, a perplexing murder, and a dog homicide cop in this Audible original story from best-selling author Larry Correia and narrated by Oliver Wyman. When the biggest colony ship in human history was sent to settle a paradise world, an accident hurtled it deep into uncharted space. 1,000 light years from Earth, with no way home and no way to call for help. The colonists' only hope for survival was the one barely habitable planet in range, a nightmare world they named Croatoan. Landing on the only 5 mountain peaks tall enough to rise above the lethal acid clouds, the settlers carved a civilization from the rock. 100 years later, 5 Points has grown into a city of corruption and violence. With powerful corporations ruling the surface domes and criminal syndicates running the caverns below, murder is just the cost of doing business. So when a special magistrate is found dissolving in a protein vat, it barely registers, until DCI Lutero Cade, the last honest cop in 5 Points, catches the case. What he finds could threaten the colony's very existence, or at the very least, Cade himself. Lost Planet Homicide will be available on Audible on October 21st, 2021, and will be free with an Audible Plus subscription.
So we are back, and before we get started again, just real fast, we want to thank the 2 guys that we would not be able to do this without. That's producer Jack, who takes care of all our technical stuff and edits all this for us and gets it on the internet so you guys can listen to it. And also Craig Nybo, who's letting us use his wonderful studio. And so check out Craig's books on Amazon. That's NYBO. And we are back talking about villains.
All right. Now, we talked a little bit about our protagonist / hero, whatever you want to call it. Now let's contrast that with our antagonists. And I'm very big on contrast when it comes to storytelling. Your horror, for example, because I'm a horror guy, your horror is only as horrific as it is contrasted against the good. Your good is only as good, and it's only awesome because of the horrific things that happen around it. It's like when you have a really, really good, delicious, amazing steak, and then you go to Walmart and you get one, and it's made of sadness and regret, right?
Yeah.
It's all about the good and the bad.
I think I know where you're going with this.
So, not unlike the one hero that DC somehow hasn't completely screwed up yet, and that's Batman. Although I'm sure by the time this airs, they'll have messed that up too.
Oh, there's probably something out there you just haven't seen it yet. Did you see the teenage one? Teenage Batman?
Well, no, I'm probably...
Oh, Steve.
No, it's
I got
probably
some
ruined.
bad news for you, dude.
So...
It's so horrible.
So the idea that I'm going with here is you've got your Batman, who is more or less your psychopathic hero, who just happened to be good. And then you've got the flip side of him, the guy that without this villain, Batman wouldn't really even be Batman. And that's the Joker.
The Joker, yeah.
Right? And they're basically, I mean, those two aren't that far off from being the same character.
And
They're
he's-
both psychopathic, just crazies.
And also, it's really interesting, the Joker, you've seen so many different takes on the Joker, and in both written form and in movies where like really talented people have had these different views of
Yeah.
the Joker and presentations, and they've all had, good things about him.
So my point here is no matter how good your protagonist is, no matter how excited you are to write that protagonist, and you're all gun ho, and that's the person that got you into your story, and you're all excited, you got to think about the bad guys.
Yeah,
You got to think about the people that they're going up against
a
and
strong
how
bad
hard
guy,
it's going to be.
A strong bad guy definitely beefs up a strong good guy. I mean, sometimes you can have stories where your bad guys aren't as fleshed out or as important, but you can have other stories where they are a major, major component and a foil, like the Joker. Well, because like in the story we're doing, like the bad guys in this one are more background. Like the big bad guys, I mean, they're killing lots of soldiers, but like the real main bad guys are more in the background for this first one. Except for we have one antagonist character who's up in the forefront.
Yeah, we do, and I think that there is an equal amount of fun and glee that the author can have when you get to write that character.
Totally.
I certainly do.
Oh, I
now,
know.
the character that Larry and I are talking about is a character named Christoph.
Who we based on? We
based off Christoph
We talked
Waltz.
about, yeah.
And
Well,
look,
we were
we
so
weren't
creative,
subtle.
we changed his name.
We put
like,
a K.
Yeah, we made it with a K. It was pretty
We're
creative.
not being subtle.
We're not subtle
And
at
it's and
all. You could tell who we'd cast if we could get a movie.
yeah, oh, I absolutely would cast Christoph Waltz as it.
You
Look,
would-
this character, it's a hat tip, it's an homage and to Christoph Waltz because of just the singular job he did just in that opening scene of that movie. And
But power character. Very powerful
a
character.
very powerful character, a very intelligent character, at times is humorous in a very dark way, and will not hesitate to murder you in the face. And I love writing that character,
Yeah.
going through all of his evil political machinations.
Well, it's funny because I've done different styles of villains. I've done the in-your-face villain.
Yeah.
I've done the psycho villain, the violent villain. I've done the chess master villain. I love writing bad guys. One of my all-time favorite bad guys, I've talked about Lorenzo earlier. So the foil to Lorenzo is a crime boss named Big Eddie. Big Eddie was based on Carson from Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. He is flamboyant. He is energetic. He is a psychopathic crime boss. The guy is super intelligent, super malicious, and he's got a lot of flash. So he's a wonderful bad guy. I love writing that guy. And then I've had other guys where I've played just, solid. I've actually, one of the things we haven't talked about is the one where we talk about some person's protagonist or some person's bad guy could be the other guy's good guy, so on and so forth. Toru Tokugawa from Grim and War. One of my favorite characters I've ever done. Toru, when we meet him, he is a bad guy. He's a villain. He is fighting the main character. He's just as powerful as the main character. He is super good at his job.
Very intelligent.
Very intelligent. He is a man of honor. But his honor requires him to straight up kill your face. And he's also a very prideful man because his dad was the big bad guy from the first book, who's also a great villain. But Toru actually evolves as the series goes on, yet he remains a jerk the entire time. The entire series, he is a jerk. He sticks to his honor. He sticks to his code, his weird version of Bushido. He's a modern samurai. This dude is awesome. I loved writing him. And it was such a challenge because, to take him from villain, straight up villain, to one of the primary three heroes at the end of the third book.
So how did you go about doing that? Because the whole point of this is so that the listeners out there who are creating their bad guy characters, quote unquote bad guy, it's like the quote from Wreck-It Ralph, right? Like, just because you're a bad guy does not mean
you are a
bad guy, right?
That was a great line.
So, and like straight up legit, like that's a perfect way for describing like antagonists that you want to write.
Well, Toru, the thing is, his basic fundamental personality, he evolved some as a character, mostly because he had to learn to be patient with people he would normally just murder. Yeah. His fundamental code did not change. His understanding of the world around him changed. So he switched from villain to hero when he got betrayed by what he believed in. So basically, his code didn't change, but the people he was devoted to cheated.
Yeah.
And that broke everything in his world. And so it gave me a chance to rebuild him. So he was never friends with these people. By the very end, he's got a grudging respect for the main character, Jake Sullivan, because those two guys are basically unkillable killing machines of just mayhem and destruction. And so they basically Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid their way across Shanghai in the last book. And the scenes with those two guys are just great because Toru is still the same guy. He's still the same human being he was in the second book. But he goes from villain and hero simultaneously. And you have no doubt when you finish this book that he could go back to villain if the circumstances required him to do so. Absolutely. He would kill all the heroes if he had to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing that's good about that, and that you alluded to, is that it's believable.
Yeah, it's his character. He comes across as a believable person with motivations. That's one thing we haven't talked about. Is like we always joke about on panels of mustache twirling villainy. That's where your Snidely Whiplash bad guy does acts of villainy because the plot requires it.
Right.
And that's villains. Nah, your villains have to be people too, unless they're space aliens or whatever. But your villains have to have understandable motivations, even if they're evil. I can look out at the world and see some truly evil people in the world right now, except they're doing what they think benefits them.
Well, for example, in the book Servants of War that you and I are writing together, the thing that you and I talked about just a little while ago was we spent, probably an hour or two chatting about the motivations of one of the main big bads in that book and series, who has a total of probably 3,000 words of screen time in the first book.
Yeah, he's only in 2 scenes in the first book. Two scenes.
Two or three scenes.
Yeah, that's it. And they're not long scenes.
No. And yet, we spent a couple hours going over, okay, we need to make sure we have this guy's motivation locked down. Because everything that he does in all the decisions that he makes, whether they're on camera or off camera, so to speak, they have to be legit and they have to be consistent.
Absolutely.
Now, in one of my previous lives when I was a book reviewer, and if you guys have read the third Grimoire book, you know that there are many things that are better than being a book reviewer, including being killed by ninjas.
Yes, there's a character named Steve Diamond in Grimoire,
and
who dies
it's
painfully.
It's tragic, and I'm still waiting for Larry to bring him back and
he
turn
was
him into
supposed
his own
to,
series.
He was supposed to die in book 2. You remember, he was going to die in book 2, and then he wound up living in book 2.
I was too tenacious in this fictional world.
So I remedied that.
That's
in
right.
book 3. No, so Steve is a good character. That was a secondary character. We haven't got into like secondary and tertiary characters, but we'll go into that another time. Your primary characters are the guys you really got to figure out. You don't need to think of the motivation and life story of every single character. People who do that usually are procrastinating to the writing, and you need to get your butt to the writing. But your main characters, you need to know what's up with them. And we talked about last episode, just our challenge at the end of it was go make some original characters and come up with their motivations and build them. You know, a fun thing I like to do? I kit bash minis. I make minis out of spare parts, miniatures. I paint those little tiny dudes. I like, for the ones that I create from scratch, giving them personalities. And as I paint them, they have a story. I know who they are. I know by looking at them what their faces look like by the time I'm done. And this is funny. And guys can do this with anything. If you see a picture of something that you think is cool, like that dude looks awesome. Well, who is he? Writers, use your brain, use your writer brain here. And who he is? And here's the cool thing. You could steal that. You don't have to actually use the picture. But if it's cool in your imagination, you can stick that in your books.
When I'm reading stuff, and like I was saying before my brain got distracted by wondering when Larry was going to write a whole Hard Magic series about the character Steve Diamond, who should have been the main character to begin with, obviously. It's when I'm reading, when I used to do reviews, one of the things that I always picked on was, okay, how consistent is this character? You know, like Larry was talking about just a minute ago, the kind of the Snidely Whiplash, the mustache twirling villain that is just making decisions for the speed of plot. And Heroes you will see the same sort of thing happen with Heroes,
all the
where
time.
and you see this heroes who make stupid decisions just so that more plot can be introduced,
so that
and
there can be
stupid things.
complications for them to
Yes.
survive.
Now
It's
the thing,
bad writing.
I
It's
hate
lazy
that.
writing.
I hate that more than anything because I want character consistency. Now, obviously, I'm not perfect, and I'm sure that someone is going to read my book and, you know, read some of my stories and be like, well, your characters are hypocrites and blah, blah, blah. Whatever. I'm not talking about that. My point is, as Larry was saying with your challenge, you know, you see that thing, you see that guy, and you're like, well, who is this guy? What is he doing? Now, when you're putting that character together, think about, like Larry did with his character Toru, what are the long-term consequences of this character? What kind of long-term decisions is this character going to make over the course of you know, whether it's several short stories, whether it's just one book, whether it's a series of books, whether you're, you know, if you're Jim Butcher and you write 8 million books in your one series because you're awesome at it, you know, what are the long-term things? How are readers going to look at your stuff and say, you know what? Yeah, that was consistent. Yeah, if this character should make this decision, that makes sense, whether it's a good guy or a bad guy, right?
Absolutely.
And
if they feel like real people,
right.
if that character feels like they could step off the page and you could talk to them in real life and they would exist as a human being, then by golly, you have scored as a writer. You have done your job. Or if you tell a little story about somebody, any character, and you could go write a whole story about that character, again, you have done your job.
Now to end this, because oftentimes Larry and I kind of end our segments with a little story as an example of some of the crazy things that we do this way. Now, I believe in an earlier episode, Larry and I talked a little bit about he and I being in the same role-playing group together, and we currently are, and we have been for more than
years.
a decade.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we started doing in the very first campaign that he and I were in together is we were writing stories based upon weird, random, nobody characters.
We did.
You know, and this was how, for me, for example, this was how I got better at writing, was because I was doing exactly what Larry was telling you to do.
We were taking NPCs and we would write little stories from their point of view.
And it all started because of Larry. And this is where I got the idea from, and this is why I started doing it.
It was mostly for me to explain how my character could get really awesome armor.
Right. But in the beginning, you know, our characters are running through this little town, and there's this one guy that basically was like, no, I'm not going to let you through this door. And we had this whole back and forth, and one of the other people in our group was complaining that we were being unrealistic with it, and was getting mad at our GM because the GM was like, no, he's not letting you through.
Because plot-wise, he couldn't.
Yeah, plot-wise, he wasn't allowed to. So what Larry did is after the thing, he was like, you know what? I'm a storyteller. I'm gonna like rationalize this in story. And so he did. And he wrote this, like, it was like a 1,500 or 2,000 word little short story that basically was explaining why this guy was so duty-bound and honor-bound to protect this door.
From our terrifying
murder
hobos.
Well, I wasn't a murder hobo. I was a pacifist.
Yeah, you were not I was a murder
You were
hobo.
a murder hobo. So...
that was the character I based Toru on.
Right. So Larry writes this story, and everyone reads it and was like, oh, dang, that's pretty cool. And I saw everybody look at it and say, oh, dang, that's pretty cool. And I went, huh. Well, what if I start doing that and I start practicing this? So I would take random NPCs that we were encountering,
Yep.
and I would write weird random stories. I did whatever genre I felt like. It didn't matter. I mashed and mished genres together. It didn't matter. And I wrote, and I said, okay, what is this character? Why does he do these things?
Yep, we had some.
Why
good
does she
ones.
do that? So I did exactly what Larry was telling you
That's
before.
how you learned to write.
That's how I learned how to write.
Yep.
So again, there's our little challenge for you. Like Larry said, let me reiterate it for you. Take some random picture I don't know, go to a freaking magazine. Open the magazine, close your eyeballs, stab down at it. I don't know, go to one of your old freaking yearbooks. Stab down at
Go to
it.
DeviantArt if you want to do sci-fi.
Yeah. And then point.
Be careful.
Be careful of that. Keep your not safe at work filters on. Point at a character and then start creating that backstory. And then do the things that we talked about. Decide who the villain is. Decide who the protagonist is. Do that whole shebang thing there, and then decide what their good attributes are, what their bad attributes. What's the line that will take that good character and turn him bad? What's the line that will take that bad character and turn him good?
Shoot his dog.
Shoot his dog. Turns out that's a good motivator. And then think about, okay, in a short story, this is how I would approach this character. How would I approach this character, though, if I was to tell multiple stories about them? How would they grow?
Yep, and it goes into what we talked about last time about building a world organically off a single character.
And before you know it, some of your plot points are going to start just sliding naturally into place because you're starting to think about a long-term character arc for both good and bad. So that's all the time we have for you today. Thank you so much again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
WriterDojo is Steve Diamond and Larry Correa. Produced by Jack Wilder and Baron Hair Studios. Theme song, Word Mercenaries by Craig Nybo. New episodes come out every Wednesday wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can help support us by going to anchor.fm/WriterDojo, by leaving us a 5-star rating or review, and by helping to spread the word. All questions and comments can be emailed to questions@writerdojo.com.
I've completely lost my brain now.
All right, well...